You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Here on the EXP, I'm Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd, and lately, I've been thinking about quitting. No, I'm not talking about quitting the show. I've been thinking about, kind of like, hey, I'm past 40, right? As you get past that age, maybe it's just me. Certain things, I just want to quit, right? Like, I don't want to try too hard anymore. I don't want to keep going with something that I think is a waste of time. Maybe once you're past 40, you start to realize how much time you have left or might have left, and you don't really want to keep going on things that you don't like. And so from time to time, I think like most people, I quit things. I might quit like eating healthier food as I try to get healthy. And I wonder about why I do that. Why do I quit it? Well, in that case, it's usually because I like the food that I'm used to, and I want to go back to eating some more, good food instead of stuff that is healthier and good for me, right? Like, I want to go back to what's comfortable and what I'm used to. So that's one reason that I might quit something. Like another, it might come down to relationships with people that I have, people that I know in my personal life. Like, why might I quit hanging out with somebody or quit trying on a new friendship? Maybe I don't think they're a good fit for me. Maybe I don't like something in their personality. Could be a lot of those kinds of reasons. And I usually want to go back to the relationships that make me feel good, the ones that I'm comfortable with, the long established ones. That happens to me quite a bit. And the last example I was thinking about is TV shows. This is a really, I think, common example for a lot of people, especially in the age of streaming. A lot of us, we turn to some of these apps and we try to start watching TV shows. We want to check out the new show that everybody's talking about or one that got recommended to us. And some of those shows I bounce off of pretty fast. Could be the plot. Maybe it's not exactly what I was hoping for. Could be the characters or the actors, the writing. Could be a lot of different things, right? Even the production values of the show itself. And I let out a little Freudian slip there because you're kind of getting maybe a sense of where I'm going with this, because all those things make me think about comic books, especially that last example. TV shows and the serial nature of them have a lot to do with comic books and their serial nature as well. There's a lot of crossover there. And so I've been thinking about what it takes to make me quit things. And on the flip side, that's equally connected to that, why I even start some of these things in the first place, like why I start reading a comic book or why I start watching a TV show. And I think that's a great discussion topic that I've been thinking about a lot recently that we can talk about all together here tonight on The Devil's Advocates. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Once again, I am Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd, and I am joined by my co-host, Kyle, who I have to sort of do this dance with now because every time I end up on this side, I get it right.
Well, I'm going to make a t-shirt where we're pointing the wrong direction.
It should be like, I'm with Kyle. And
Right.
But Kyle had the suggestion for the topic this week, so I think it's a great topic because it is something that I've roundabout been thinking about when it comes to all those other things, like I mentioned in the cold open, and that is a lot of stuff that as we get older, I think as I was a younger person, I didn't really think about it as much, like why I was starting some things and why I was quitting them, but I do ruminate on that a lot more as I get up there in years. And I think it's a good topic for us to talk about tonight. So as we're discussing this, make sure you have your comments ready to go in chat so we can kind of feed off your guys' energy here as well and talk about your comments as well.
Yeah, no, I was going to say your cold open got a little existential there, buddy. All of a sudden we're talking about death, and I'm just like, do you guys remember when Spider-Man was good? Ron's over here talking about death. So the topic comes from a kind of a weird thing that I've been rolling around in my brain. Which is I've come across some books recently that I've been hugely excited for, only to at the end of the day be like, oh, that was no good. And I don't want to call anybody out, but I can give examples if people want to know. But it's the question of what makes you stop reading something.
Yeah.
Because very seldom Do you start reading something that you were unexcited for? Then midway through, remember you weren't excited for it and then stop reading, right? Usually you start because it was something you were interested in, something you had some excitement about, something that was sold to you as a good idea. And then something comes along that makes you go, you know what? I'm out. And so the idea behind what would make you stop reading a comic, not stop reading comics as a whole,
No. Sorry
but
if I gave that impression.
Right, to stop reading a comic.
Yeah, a title.
Like, and I had a book recently where I'm 6 pages in and I'm going, nope, I'm done.
I'm out.
Right, and part of this kind of rolling it around in my brain came from the website Does the Dog Die?
Oh, I've heard about that.
Which is this website that exists so you can go and check if the dog in the movie dies so you know whether or not you're going to see it. Which I've seen, John Wick. I've seen Old Yeller. I don't need that trauma. So I get it. But what is it about a comic that makes you stop reading it? If Johnny Quest off's banned, I'm definitely out. Yeah, that's true. So I think we have to start with kind of a simple concept, right? When you're trying to find a new series to read, what do you look for? What's the thing that pulls you in?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, man.
Right. Do you wait for reviews from sources you trust? Do you go by cover? Do you go by art team? What do you look for when you're trying to find something to read? And I think part of the way we stop having to stop reading comics is to reestablish our way we judge what we start. Very seldom are you roped into, hey, you have to read Spider-Man or you have to read Batman. And that only ever happens when you have a teacher who's cool and assigns it to you as homework. So let me ask you, Bronze, and I want to hear in the chat. We've already got some people chiming in, Skunk Snot and Buddy. X over there, Mr. Nope. When you're looking for a new book, what do you look at before you make the purchase decision?
Yeah, and the fascinating thing to me is how this has changed for me over the years. Like, I went from actively seeking out certain comic books because of the property involved, like just interest. Like, I want to build my base of understanding more about X-Men, or I want to understand more about Batman, or I want to understand more about, whatever. That's how I started reading comics. Like, when I started collecting comics other than just the one title that got me into comics. And then that shifted to establishing a relationship within my LCS. And so I would talk to the owner, and I would, and at that time in my life, luckily I had a couple LCSs in my hometown, which felt like a rare treat. And I could kind of bounce ideas off of each one, get recommendations, that kind of thing. I love that relationship that happens when they see you pulling certain titles and then they start to recommend, like, hey, you know what? I know you like this. You should check this out. It's got a similar vibe, or I think you'd like the art because you like this art, that kind of thing. And so that, to me, for my 20s and my early 30s, was probably the way that I read comics the most. Was either a customer in the store, maybe having that conversation, LCS owner, maybe them kind of, showing me a section of previews or something like that, to try to get established on what might be out there. But as I got older, it really, and it kind of makes me wonder about kind of what I talked about in the cold open about how selective you can kind of be sometimes. And when I say older, another factor in that is I had a kid in my late 30s, right? So also free time becomes a lot more valuable. The time that you have to do whatever you want. And so you're a little more selective on the movies you go, want to go see, comic books you want to read. It all goes hand in hand. And so these days, what I'm basing comic book reading on, and I'm somebody who's fortunate enough in one way because of the free time problem, I don't care if I read something late. I'm totally okay with that. I wish to some degree that I could read things the week they come out, that kind of thing, be in on the conversation and the zeitgeist of everything happening at that time. I'm totally okay with that not happening, which gives me the benefit of being able to wait for a little bit longer reviews or a little, get a few issues in and people really start talking about it. And then I can go, okay, and since I read mostly digitally, I can go pick up those trades and kind of get in that way. Because of that, my hit ratio feels really high these days. And that, by what I mean by that is when I go to grab a trade or something like that, get the first volume of a series that's out, most of the time I'm I'm enjoying it because I've been excited about the concept. I like the creators involved, those sorts of things. The only other thing that happens that gets me into comic books, and it's the suckeriest thing of all time, but it's a huge part of most comic book collecting, is liking a cover, getting drawn into a cover. And it's just like, what is that? I think Silver Coin is a title I could think of where I kind of just, hey, I don't know what this is. And I just grabbed it based on the cover, right? That's a good example of that. So that's kind of it for me. It's kind of changed over the years to the point where now it's that extremely selective because I don't like the feeling of, oh, I wasted my time reading 2 or 3 issues of something and I don't like it and I want to move on.
Yeah, no, it's funny. For me, Silver Coin was the exact opposite for me. I put that on my pull list sight unseen of cover A of issue 1. But I saw that it was Michael Walsh doing all the art.
Mm-hmm.
And that for the first 2, there were different writers. So I'm like, okay, I need to see what this is, right? So it's an interesting thing how the one book is different. But I was thinking about my favorite Jonathan Hickman story. And my favorite Mike Costa story. And my favorite Cy Spurrier story. And it was this book from, I don't even remember who published it. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Avatar Press, called God is Dead.
Okay.
And the covers on this book were just bat crap crazy. And to the point where I bought every A cover and then I bought every of a very specific variant of it because the covers were so bat crap crazy.
Nice.
And that's just an example, right? But we have some, we have some comments here about how do we get started. Sean changed back to your other account. Covers usually draw me in when I'm at the store. On Kickstarter and other crowdfunding platforms, it's the tagline and sales pitch. Right. And everybody go subscribe to Hydrosylum Comics. It's Jay and Sean's channel that they do in their free time. So check them out. But Sean, if you come in here and I don't know you're Sean and I think you're Jay, I'm going to make fun of you in a different way, and I don't want to do that.
Or, hey, even better, watch from both accounts. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah. Looking twice, bro. I usually start with new indies Kickstarters. If the story gets me, I'll keep backing. Writer and interior art.
Sure.
For the bigger names, I'll listen to YouTubers and see what hits. If it's something I'm finding by happenstance, cover art and title draws me in, specific writers or artists get an automatic buy, blind or not.
Hey, Triple B, I got a follow-up for you said the writer and the interior art. And I'm curious, what's your method? Like, are you talking about going to the LCS and looking through the issue? Are you talking about knowing the interior artist is somebody you like, a combination of those things? I'm really curious because if you're also just pulling blind, like sometimes you get interior art previews too, I know, but I'm just wondering what your process is there.
Yeah, no, like, so for me, there are a few writers that I'll just buy sight unseen, right? I don't even care. It's you have writers like Matt Fraction. Matt Fraction, I've said it before, I've said it to his face. could write paint drying and I would buy it. Same with a guy like Zeb Wells, Chip Zdarsky, some of these active writers, but then classic artists. If I see a Sergio Aragon art page or art in the book or on the cover, I'm buying it. Right? John Romita Jr. is another one of those that just doesn't matter. But what happens when the thing that hooks you doesn't match with what the book is? Right?
Yeah.
Like, if I buy a book because it's got a Sergio Aragon cover and I get inside and it looks like Rob Liefeld interiors, I'm going to have a problem.
And that happens so much these days too, because I know that we don't live in the past, and I know that the days of the interior artist doing the cover art or a similar interior artist doing the cover art are pretty much by the wayside. But I've had that disconnect too, where you're drawn into a cover and even like the concept of the cover could have nothing to do with what's inside, right? Like it could be like almost like a, I don't want to say like a false trailer kind of a thing, but you kind of get that feeling, right? Like you get sucked in by some concept that you see in the art, and then there's none of that in the story inside, and it gets a little bit of a disconnect for me, for sure.
Real quick, I want to give a shout out to Jim P. Comics, Fat Jack's Comic Crypt, Chuck Pino, KT Comic Books over on Instagram. Chuck says my favorite books are the ones my friends rave about. Right, like, okay, so this is exactly an example. Stan Sakai does a lot of variants, or Scotty Young, that have nothing to do with what's inside. At what point does that disconnect, right? Like, I know if I see a Scotty Young cover, I can't expect a Scotty Young inside.
Yeah.
But for a while there, that disconnect didn't make sense to me.
Or even some of the biggest variant cover artists in the game right now, like, I mean, you may or may not have liked their art back in the day, but Adam Hughes, J. Scott Campbell, they used to do interior art, Yeah, art. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, is that disconnect enough to get you to stop reading?
It definitely can be in my case. I know you're kind of asking a little bit rhetorically, but for me, that's 100% the case. When the art on the cover doesn't match, or not even going beyond that, if you're told it's going to be, I'm making something up kind of because I don't want to pick on anybody either, really. But if it's a conspiracy theory story and you think it has to do with like the government or something like that, and then you read it and it's really more of kind of, it's taking a completely different tack, right? Like you're following a bunch of kids, the government's barely involved. If they focus too much in the solicitations or the preview text or the sales pitch of the book on things that aren't really covered inside, okay, now not only am I, it's kind of like I've had this happen where I've seen trailers. This happened a lot in the 90s. You'd see a trailer for a movie, you go watch the movie, and that's almost like the trailer was edited to be a completely different genre of movie, right?
Right.
And so when that happens, well, now you're really working uphill. It better be a damn good comic book because it's not the one that I intended to buy.
Right.
It could still be, but what are the odds of that, right?
Right. I mean, and it's an interesting thing because I actually just had this happen and it went the other direction. There's a book out from Ahoy called Dead Weights that I thought was a wrestling book, and it's not. It's about supervillains who aren't good at it and get kicked out of the supervillain team and are now like, what do we do now? Right. It's an interesting concept.
Sounds
it's a pretty
cool.
fun book. And I'm happy I'm reading it, but I only started reading it because I thought it was about professional wrestling. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum. So what's the last book? And I just want titles, guys. Like, and I don't put anybody on blast. This is a very personal preference thing. What's the last book that made you actively quit in the middle? Did you quit because of a single story, or did you quit because, like, did you quit the whole series, like, or did you just give up an entire publisher? Like, what happened? And for me, the answer is actually a book from Boom Studios, called Man's Best that I was very excited for. And
Do I need to go to the dog dying website real fast?
No, because
Okay.
they totally live, but that's the problem. You don't have any reason to necessarily care about them other than the fact that they are pets. Like, and so 2 issues in, I went, you know what, I'm done. It's not giving me any reason to care. What was the last one? Sean is basically throwing the Tinian verse under the bus over here.
Yeah, I see
Something
that.
is killing the children, House to Slaughter. Uh,
I'll tell you my answer while we're waiting for some more to roll in the chat. So, um, technically, I think it was called the Uncanny Spider-Man. It's the Nightcrawler goes to New York to pretend to be Spider-Man. I couldn't make it past a couple issues of that. It was just too weird to me. But I don't really count that because I only read a couple issues. The Teeny Howard Excalibur run, because most of what I read within the Marvel stuff is X-Men stuff. And there were so many titles at that point. My goal was to read all of them. In all the new House of X era stuff, there was a reading order in the back. And since it's all on Marvel Unlimited, when I go to read it, I intended to read all of it. Excalibur, it's the weird world setting and the magic stuff. Just some people say they hate space and X-Men. Hey, that's your personal preference. Magic and X-Men stuff, and outside of the actual character of magic, usually makes me want to bounce off. And so for me, it was just the setting and I liked all the characters involved, and the beat to beat storytelling was interesting, but I couldn't get wrapped up in the setting. And I'm like, why do we keep going back here? Let's just leave that. Everyone dies here and weird things happen. Let's just leave it alone.
right. I mean, and see, that's the other thing. And I want to make sure we put this out there real early on in the show. Sometimes you stop reading a comic not because you're displeased with the comic.
Yeah.
Sometimes something like Sean happens. Something is killing the children was more because I moved and fell off. Okay, sometimes car breaks down, bills happen, whatever.
Yeah.
And you have to put something aside and you just don't go back to it.
Well, so here's an example right to that point. I quit Something That's Killing the Children for a while because I read it late, and I extremely enjoyed it. I've talked about it on the show before. We talked about like our best horror titles that we wanted to recommend for Halloween. I think I binged the first 3 trade volumes like nonstop, and then I wanted to wait because I wanted to binge read like another couple trade volumes. So I had to quit for a long time and not pay attention to spoilers for that series. Now I fully intended to come back to it, but I intentionally moved off of it for a while because I didn't want to read it month to month.
Yeah, no, and see, I wouldn't call that quitting. I would call that waiting.
Yeah, it kind of is, but at the same time, it's like I wasn't actively buying the comic every month, which does sort of make me feel a little guilty, you know, now that I discovered I kind of wanted to do that. But I also there's and I think TV shows, this is kind of where it's a good example. Some TV shows, I love that I get to wait week to week and kind of theorize and build up, like X-Men 97 right now. I can't wait for the final episode. I'm glad I have that anticipation of waiting. Other shows, you know, and whatever, you can name whatever show you want. It's awesome because I really do want to move right into that next episode. And 3 hours later, I come out of a black hole and I've learned so much more about the show. It's just different preferences for different titles.
Ted Lasso for me was like that. Is I watched the first 2 seasons after the second season came out. So I never had to wait week to week for episodes until the 3rd season. And now it's like, oh, this is brutal.
At least those episodes were crazy long compared to the first couple seasons.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, I have this thought, right, that, and we need to take our first break here in just a second, but I have this thought that everybody has specific comic deal breakers. Something that can be done in a book that makes you snap your fingers and turn the key. Right? And then at the same time, everyone has personal things that come up that have the same effect. And I want to get into the differences when we come back. So we're going to take a real quick break. But before we do, I want to tell everybody something that we haven't told everybody yet. I don't know if they mentioned it on Comic Collectibles earlier, if Nick told everybody, or if they're waiting for me to put out an email, which will come out tomorrow. But Saturday, starting at 4, could be, and we think it is, the biggest day in the history of live online comic sales ever. Here on the experience, I know for a fact we will be offering stacks of Mega Keys. Ghost Rider 1, Iron Fist 1, New Mutants 98, single-digit Fantastic Fours, perhaps file copies from artists.
Whoa.
And one book that Bronze and I have debated with quite a ferocity here on the show, whether it is or isn't a first appearance of someone from a certain series, will be available Saturday on the GM Comics Show. Fat Jacks will have a stack of stuff too. Tune in on Saturday, but tune in all week. We're encouraging all of our shows to bring out the heavy hitters to give you the biggest week of online live sales ever here on the experience. So bookmark the channel, hit subscribe, hit like, do all that kind of stuff. Set your notifications, set alarms in your phone, whatever you got to do to be here. But tune in this week, because this week has the potential to be epic. We'll be right back. What do you call the place on Spider-Man's wrists where the webs come out? His website. I hate myself for writing that joke, but you'd make me feel so much better if you just visited our website. We have links to our merch, new release lists, all the show info, and so much more. TheEXPLive.com. Did you know that Arthur, King of the Britons, in Monty Python and the Holy Grail was played by a famous Graham? Check out another famous Graham by following our Instagram. Welcome back in, everybody. This is the Devil's Advocates, and I want to remind you, head over to the explive.com and click on merch. Right now, we have 2 limited edition merch drops available on the site. The J edition, fill out the form shirt, the one Jay designed, and the Amy edition, the one that is celebrating our favorite person who keeps the Dynamic Forces train running, Nick's assistant, Amy. So if you head over there, Jay's is only available until Wednesday. So you've got tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday until I remember to take it down to buy Jay's. And Amy's is only available for another week beyond that. So get moving. Get yourself some fill out the form t-shirts. All right.
Yes.
So let's move into... Oh, God, we're having the debate in the stupid private chat. Boy, oh, boy, oh, boy.
We need to have some guests on and rehash that topic at some point. I think it'd be fun. I mean, by fun, I mean torturous, but also fun in that way.
Why don't we do that? Why don't you plan that for June 10th when I'm not here?
I might.
Do it. Oh, by the way,
for a star-studded all-star lineup of everybody arguing about the first appearance of Wolverine.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here June 10th, everybody, so just be prepared. I want to get into some of this question of what makes you stop.
Yeah.
I believe that everybody has some deal breakers. And I want you to tell me in the comments. And if you're a comic creator paying attention to this, look at these things because they're deal breakers for people. If you can avoid them, I would.
Keep in mind, everybody's got different opinions about what, that might be a very small percentage of people that have a specific thing, but hey, it's good to know about, right? It's market research for you.
Right. I also want to give a shout out to Curtis Stelfox, Dennis Barger, Mike on a Bike, which is a great username. Taduno, and John Spilios over on the Instagrams.
Oh, nice. So, I know a few of those people for sure, and I'm happy to have them all here.
Absolutely. So, Deal breakers. I'll give you mine first.
Yeah, please do.
If you introduce a character and have them play a major role, but never tell us who they are or why they matter, I'm done. It's the biggest single turnoff in a comic book ever for me is telling me I have to care about somebody, but not telling me why. Right? It's like when you're watching a sitcom and they introduce the crazy neighbor and they're in every episode, but they never explain the relationship between the main characters and the neighbor. Like,
Yeah.
this is a character I'm supposed to care about and be into, but why? Are they actually friends, or is it just an annoying neighbor? Because I got one of those. I don't need one on my TV.
I
How about
love
you,
it.
Bronze? You got one?
For me, the high level one that I think of that I've encountered the most, it's changed a little bit in the way stories are told now, the way that creators work on storylines, but it does still happen. It's when you have a good, strong first story arc on a volume of a series or something like that, and then the follow-up team, the direction completely shifts. Like it doesn't feel like there's a transition that is smooth, unless somehow the quality goes way up right away. That's a deal breaker for me. This used to happen all the time when you'd go from one storyline to the next, and then it's really traditional for the next creative team to come in and want to maybe kind of reset the playground and have it go their way or whatever. And I think that can be done well sometimes. Depends on the characters involved, and it really depends on the creators involved. But when you see like a really big downgrade in art, or a really, I hate to use the word sloppy story, but a story that doesn't feel as polished as what you were just experiencing, and it doesn't feel like it is taking into consideration what happened before, that's a really big problem for me.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the other ones for me that gets me that makes me stop is this idea that comic books should be nostalgia trips. If I don't feel like a character is moving, if it's the same character I was reading in the 90s and I'm still reading it today, and they've not done anything to justify that lack of movement, then it's clear that the publisher, the writer, the artist, the editors don't care. Otherwise, that character would move forward or would do something. So for me, it's this lack of cogent storytelling practices that also turn me off. Like, I don't mind changing a character to fit the moment in time, right? Superman no longer being, truth, justice, and the American way guy, or
Yeah.
Captain America becoming nomad
Mm-hmm.
as a response to the way, you know, they were being forced to push Captain America a certain direction in the Reagan era. For me, uh, one that's really interesting is Fighting American, which is a whole character created because they didn't like the direction that they were pushing Captain America post World War II. Right? So I don't mind a character changing if it has a reason to change. But at the same time, not changing a character just for the sake of not changing a character is also incredibly boring.
Yeah. And you asked for a single issue kind of example too, and for me, the single issue example is, it's kind of hard to explain, but I hate when I see a character sidelined to try to introduce some new character that we're supposed to care about. And I don't, usually this happens like in team books, where I see like a character who should step up and be able to do that thing they're supposed to do. And there'll be some newer character on the team that you could tell the writer's more in love with, and they want to give them the moment to shine. And they'll almost like make one character look terrible in service this other character. Now, that can work if it has a reason for both characters for it to have gone that way. Otherwise, it's like, give me a reason why all of a sudden you just nerfed Wolverine in favor of X new character, X being a funny placeholder there. But I see this happen a lot in comics where it's just very hard for me to keep going if the writer is so clearly playing favorites. It's one thing that, I think he's notorious for it. Going back and reading the Claremont stuff with fresh eyes when I did kind of a full read through of Uncanny X-Men, instead of, because that's kind of some of the first stuff I read when I did go back and read stuff. Reading it as a little bit older, you can definitely see the favorite playing, and it's harder to digest in some places, right? Like, because it pulls me out of the immersion of feeling like I'm reading a story, and more of like, okay, I'm reading someone's guided narrative, which of course I'm doing all the time anyway, but I want to get lost in that world a little bit. And if it doesn't feel like it's being done for a good storytelling reason, it can come across as extremely artificial and kind of pull me out of the story. And if I see that happening in comics today, it's kind of that weird thing too, because I don't want them to just bring in the old character just because, but why bring them in at all? Just give that new character their own spot to shine, unless you're planning on a narrative reason to do that to the old character that sends them down a journey for personal development and growth. That's great. If you can do that, awesome. If you can't, find a different way.
Yeah, and like I said, guys, keep putting your deal breakers in the chat, and we'll talk about it. But one of the interesting things, though, is like we're listing off our deal breakers, but they become less deal breakers the more attached we are to a character, right?
Yeah.
The X-Men can get away with a lot more for you than they could for me, because I don't care about the X-Men as much. Right? Like, I'm not an X-Men fan per se. I enjoy the X-Men, but I'm not trying to read everything in the Fall House Powers of universe. I honestly couldn't care less. So if I jump in and it's a iffy book, I'm out way quicker than if, say, they did that same thing to Spider-Man. Which, by the way, I haven't really been reading lately because, it's not been great. So,
but what you're talking about that with X-Men, I mean, I haven't read Spider-Man since Superior Spider-Man. Since that arc ended, like that was the last kind of moment for me for Spider-Man. I want to go back and read Spider-Man. I keep hearing don't bother. So that's another kind of like quitting kind of way. In a way, it's like you don't hear anything that's bringing you into that long-standing title that's making you excited about it. But yeah, it is weird. Like I use that example of X-Men, and you kind of mentioned, to me, it can kind of go, that coin can kind of go on the other side too, because if you really care about the characters, you may be more critical to something that happens that might make you not want to continue. Like if something, I really don't want to mention specific examples because you're going to get, one side or the other on every little topic like this, but just say there's some character that you love and you've read every issue that they've done, and they do something with that character that you just cannot get behind in any way, shape, or form. It immediately makes you want to throw down the comic book you're reading. Sometimes the passion can raise those feelings as well. The flip side of that, though, is that I think you are more likely to come back to that character down the road with like another creator takes over or something like that, right? Like that's where I think it's not really quitting so much as I'm done with this until they fix it.
Right, I'm taking a break.
Yeah.
And that's fair. At the same time, I think it's important to remember that like personal associations change your red flags, change your deal breakers, change your break points, right? I read books by creators I was friends with way longer than I should have because they weren't good, but they were my friends.
Makes sense.
Right? I invested a lot of time and money when I should have said to my friend, "Man, it ain't for me right now." Or, "Hey, you remember when you used to be good?" I said that to Dirk Manning recently. "Hey, you remember when you used to be good?" Now, granted, I was busting his chops because he probably just wrote the best thing he's ever written, but still. It's this idea of personal relationship to the characters, personal relationship to the creators, personal relationship to the publisher. I supported Aftershock a lot longer than a lot of people did because I had a great relationship with the people at the publisher. It changes your break even point, right? Your snap out point.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I mean, like, it is one of those things too, where it's like your personal relationship with like, let's just say it's a creator you love. Like, let's say there's a writer that you really like, or an art style that you really enjoy. I am way more likely to keep picking up that creator's work, even if I don't enjoy the subject matter that's being written or drawn as much. Or if it falls off, I don't even have to have that personal relationship with the creator. It could just be that I really enjoy their stuff. There's writers and artists that I followed where it's like, you know, a year or two later, you've been reading their stuff and you're like, well, I don't enjoy this anymore, and I'm still buying it. Like, why am I doing that? And that is definitely a hard one, because, you know, there's so many artists, and again, I don't want to pick on anybody, but there's so many artists I can think of, for example, where it's like there's a golden period of their art that I go back and I look at, and it's just fantastic. It's everything I want in art. And this happens to artists a lot. They get older, they aren't able to draw as much, they get sucked up into doing only covers or whatever, things that obviously are better for them financially, but it's not as enriching as it was. And, you know, you still support them, but at some point it's not the same artwork that you fell in love with, and you have to kind of realize it's time to move on.
Right. Are there, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one because we could get into some real dark weeds here. Are there topics that if a book you're reading delves into, you set the book down and don't come back? I mean, it's more a yes or no.
I don't think there are for me. Not like any one specific topic, because my thought process is there are topics I do not enjoy for sure. But that said, the right creators could make it interesting to me. Some of my favorite things in all of media have been, oh, I hate that type of thing normally, but this is a fresh take or approach on it that, you know, it subverts my expectations, or it spins that genre on its head. And, you know, some horror comics, I've famously said, or infamously said, I don't love horror comics, but some of the best horror comics are some of the best comics I've ever read, because it does play on those expectations for me. So I think that's definitely, you know, again, I'd love to see what Chad has to say about this, but I definitely think that's possible for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when a topic is broached in a comic that is a deal breaker for me, I'll let everybody know. But there are certainly comics that, because of the topic of the series, I've never started. Crossed is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this: there were things in The Boys, especially later on in the comic series, that caused me to stop reading The Boys and caused me to never watch the show. And that's not a knock on it. It just, for me, was a little too triggering or a little too heavy. I didn't want to deal with it. And, you know, it's interesting because up here we had Curtis, where he stopped reading The Walking Dead because the death of Glenn hit him too hard. That's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing that caused him to do something that, you know, we're kind of painting in a negative light. But you can't let comics, just because you love the comics, steal your joy.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of conundrum we find ourselves in sometimes.
100%. And I mean, you know, I just want to mention, I think you said Sean over at Hydra Asylum said, does the personal experience you've had with the creator affect you reading their work? And we kind of talked about that a little bit. You know, you're asking Hydra, I'll just tell you, I've never had a negative interaction with a creator that made me want to stop reading their work. But I have a little bit of a different thing than most people when it comes to separating artists. And I don't mean just in this case, illustrators. I mean, in general, musical, whatever. If I like their stuff, I tend not to get too caught up in the other aspect of it. I have had negative interactions with people at cons. We've talked about a couple of them on this show at one point. That kind of thing. I've had a couple negative experiences, but I don't let it affect my enjoyment of their work if their work is good.
Right.
Same thing was said, like their personal beliefs and all that kind of stuff. I don't really, as long as their story is good, and as long as the comic's good, I don't care about the other stuff. One way or the other, it doesn't really bother me. If they happen to be saying that they're saying things I love and I love them, it probably increases my enjoyment a little bit. But if they're negative and creepy or weird or any of that kind of stuff, it doesn't really affect my like of their actual work unless I start to see those things in the work. That's the difference.
3. There are 3 creators whose work I will never again interact with because of bad interactions with those creators. I'm not going to name them on the show. Sean, you know how to get a hold of me if you want to know the names. But and I will say this, the 3 interactions I've had with them are I'm part of a crowd interactions. So it wasn't them to me specifically, but it was things about their behavior, about their existence that I find so objectionable that I need to, for my own mental health, separate.
Yeah.
So like I said, that is the only time I've ever had that one way or another. I don't read books from creators I love. Like on a personal level, my best friends in this business, I don't necessarily always read their books. Because if they're not good, I don't want to have to be like, oh, I loved it. And at the same time, I don't want to be like, bro, you're better than this. What the hell? So a lot of times it's why I don't back more Kickstarters. Because I become friends with these creators and I don't want to judge their books too hard.
So I'm just, and this might be a slight tangent, but I am curious about this. I think it's in the ballpark here. Are there times where you would consider that because you know that they can accept constructive feedback if you were to give it to them, or do you not even want to have to bother doing that about their work? Like you wouldn't want to have to get in that conversation in the first place with them, or are there times in certain people where you're okay with that because you know if you said, yeah, I didn't really like the character that had this much focus or whatever the problem is, would you be okay having that conversation, or would you kind of just prefer to avoid it altogether?
That's a creator by creator decision.
Okay.
I can absolutely to his face tell Henri when he's not doing good. Because I know that Henri looks for that feedback and he gets it from Chuck and from me and from several others. However, there are other creators with whom I'm friends who could not accept that. And in that case, I'm out. Like I don't even back the projects unless it's a project I would back if it was done by somebody else.
Right.
So
I gotcha.
So like I said, there are certain creators that are great with that. There are certain creators who are not. And it really depends on a creator thing. So we're running out of time and we're supposed to take another break. We're going to skip the other break and I'm going to do this. Everybody, the experience is brought to you in part by Battle Quest Comics and A Wave Blue World Comics. If you're interested in any of those, we run spots for them here on the experience, but head over to their individual websites and check out their different stories and their different offerings. And then head into your local comic shop and ask them to order the stuff you're into from them. It's always super helpful when you let them know, hey, you heard about them from the experience for the first time and you decided to check them out. That's always greatly appreciated when you mention that. At the same time, in the description on all of our videos, there's a link for something called vidIQ. If you have a YouTube channel and you want to know more about your YouTube channel, some of the best analytic work you can find is done with vidIQ. So if you buy it, we get a little bit of a taste, not too much, just a little reasonable taste. That helps us, pay for Jay's, dog treats that he gives the dogs so they don't bark while he's on the air or whatever. It's not a lot. It's just a little something. So make sure you check that out as well. All right. So before we kind of wrap up here, I want to go back through and talk about some of the comments we've gotten.
Yeah.
Triple B, excuse me. Bronze, can you read it for a second?
Yeah, sure. Triple B says, Vampirella Dracula love story. The last issue made me stop reading Christopher Priest for a year, but now I'm back reading Vampirella 666 on its way to issue 700, and I'm enjoying the new issues. Interesting. I'm not familiar with that. I'd be curious to go read that and see what you're talking about, Triple B. I think I only got the first issue of that, I want to say. So I need to finish the story.
Curtis, this is an interesting one. And this is, I could talk a little bit about this too. I end up stopping a lot accidentally because I'll start reading what I think is a mini series, and on the cover it will have 1 of 6 or similar, but then they'll come out with more issues because it was popular and I've moved on. One for me was I would start a series because number 1 was available on FOC, and number 2 wasn't. So my LCS would not see it to order it, or they wouldn't get the information soon enough. So now I'm 3 issues behind by the time we get the back orders. So that is a frequent one too, because of the way comic books are sold.
Like just logistics alone have made me stop reading series before, for sure, in that kind of a way. Like that problem, and also just because even when I was getting monthly pulls in an LCS, I would have problems where I couldn't get down there often enough to put my orders in, let alone to pick up my comics. And I know that's a problem, but we were always cool on that side of things. But yeah, just that logistics alone can be difficult for you. I think these days, I imagine it's a lot better at like being able to probably either email or message stores, that kind of stuff. But when it had to be physically in the store or write them a letter, it was difficult.
Right. Collector P. I stopped reading X-Men because all of the reboots every year. The Hickman Krakoa story was good, but anticlimactic. I miss reading good X-Men stories. And see, I would say that the Hickman stuff wasn't even anticlimactic. It was just long. Takes a while to get to the climax if you're telling a long story. But at the same time, if you came up on the Chris Claremont, setup punch kind of X-Men stories, where your longest stories were 2, maybe 3 issues, then I get this.
Well, I mean, Dark Phoenix was fairly long, but
right. But by and large,
generally the point stands. For me, that's an interesting one because I mean, I can speak to this a little bit because of the X-Men stuff. The one that gets me about that a little bit, and I used to call it that. I have tried to stop calling it the Hickman era because he really wasn't super involved for a lot of it. I mean, not like in the issue to issue stuff. So it's kind of, I know he probably had the plan. He probably kind of helped lay some of the editorial for some of that stuff, but it just seems like it was kind of, it would have benefited from more of his touch rather than less, I think. And I think that's kind of not a very unpopular opinion, but it helps me to think of it as kind of more the Krakoa era, like you mentioned in the comment. It does have a problem, but at least it was a continuous story that went on for a few years. The problem is if you don't like that continuous story, obviously that's not so good.
Right. And that's exactly it. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it was anticlimactic. I think it just took too long.
Yeah.
So with our last couple minutes, I just wanted to see if Bronze, do you have any kind of final thoughts on this? Kind of this idea of what would make you stop reading comics, and because we want to grow comics, how can you avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the takeaway from this is that I want to do less of what I do now, which is sit back and wait for things to be out for a long time before I go and read them. And more of what I used to do, back in the day, which was talk to people at my LCSs, talk to people in the comic community, here in our comments, here on YouTube, get more recommendations that way. Like try to find and actively seek out and be more of a spokesperson for the things that I like, to get my word out there about, hey, this is what I think is good. There's some weird stuff that ties into that with being a YouTuber where I feel a little weird doing that sometimes. But I do like getting those recommendations. I think it's a community. It's better for us if we go out there and we do talk about these things and we celebrate good stories by trying to share them with other people and trying to get other people to read them. I think that's good for comics. I think that's good for the readers, and I think it's good for building those relationships. For example, not a plug or anything like that, but like on my Discord server, I have a section. It's basically the book club. It's the reading club. It's for people to go talk about the stuff they're reading, and I think that's, whether it's there, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's anywhere, it doesn't matter. Go somewhere that you can talk with people and share those things about comic books that you love and what you're liking about them. Kind of that old school philosophy of like, let's accentuate the positive things about comics that we're enjoying to kind of help spread, the positive forces of those comic books to other people. That's my advice, or my final thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah, for me, I think it comes from starting from a more informed place. Not just looking at covers and expecting books to be good, or not just looking at creative teams and blindly jumping in. It's more about looking at all of it: solicitation, covers, creative teams, history of creators I don't know, what else have they done, stuff like that, so that I have a more more thought through reason for jumping into a series. And then at the same time, because I read so many books every week for review that I wouldn't otherwise read, for me, at least part of it is recognizing that not every comic book can be an Eisner winner, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes comic books just have to do a yeoman's job. They have to show up, put in a shift. And not holding everything to that really high standard is going to be big for me. So,
well,
those
I
are
mean,
kind of...
I was gonna say you're in kind of a unique spot, man, because you do have to read, not have to, not trying to say it like that, but you are reading a lot of comic books every week, and that's something too that I think I would kind of encourage people that don't normally do that. Try that every once in a while. Try reading some stuff that isn't maybe naturally in your wheelhouse to kind of expand your horizons a little bit too. I think that's an important piece of advice that should be put out there.
When I had my shop, I would read every book that we put on the wall every week. So sometimes that was 100 books. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'd be like, I don't understand why people buy this. It got like that with me for The Walking Dead for the longest time. It's like, I don't understand why people are buying this. It's not at all interesting. But people loved it. And great. But not holding everything to that, every comic should be able to be for somebody's first and be able to be an addictive influence on somebody.
Yeah.
And at the same time, remembering that sometimes you just have to tell the middle bit of the story where nothing happens before you can tell the end bit where everything comes together, and not getting frustrated by that.
Yeah.
So before we leave, we're going to wrap up. Bronze will be back next week on this show, and he'll have a Big B McFly show immediately following the Best Coast Comics show. But Bronze, what else do you have happening over on the Bronze Age Nerd YouTube channel?
I am still, there's a video that has been my white whale that I'm still trying to get out, and I'm still trying to get that content out there. And then until that video's out, I don't want to pretend like there's going to be a whole lot more coming, which is why I've put effort into this show. I put effort into Best Coast Comics over there, and I do recommend checking out both of those. And I don't just say that because I'm on both of them. I think they actually genuinely do something different than a lot of other shows on YouTube are doing for the comic book space. So that's kind of it for now. And you can always follow my social media if you want to see what's coming out, because I usually will talk about it there.
Cool. We have here on The Experience, like I talked about earlier, the potential for the biggest week of online live sales ever. Like I said, including some really colossal books.
And that's what I'm doing on Saturday, by the way. I'm tuning into that show. That sounds really cool.
And we are dangerously close to launching some new content for you guys. So if you don't already subscribe to our YouTube channel, make sure you do that. The closer we get to the closer we get to 2750, the closer we get to that show. So make sure you're watching, you're hitting subscribe over there. But just as a reminder, head over, check out our merch, check out all the other things, and tune in tomorrow, where Jay, myself, and Miss Jen are going to try to give you the best advice we can so that you know what you're buying and you don't quit in the middle. That's tomorrow at 7 o'clock Eastern here on The Experience for Minute to Skim It. So let's check that out if you're into that kind of stuff. I don't know. I lost my train of thought in the middle of that sentence.
No, it's perfect,
So
man. Go check it out if you're into this topic.
Thanks for being here. Visit your local comic shop. Check out everybody's pages. We'll see you next time. We know you probably get a lot of emails, but could you please make sure to sign up for our mailing list? We don't send a lot of emails, and we try not to bother you. We just want to give you the best information about all the cool stuff that's going on around here. Sign up on our website, theexplive.com.